Alright, so last time I took a tour through Chill Out, which is one of my favorite Halo 1 maps, and this time we're going to be looking at Rat Race, which is a very different kind of map than Chill Out. So Chill Out, even though it's not like a Hang 'em High or Blood Gulch, Chill Out is still one of these maps that got a lot of play in local split screen and LAN parties, and also saw a remake as Cold Storage in Halo 3. Rat Race is more one of these kind of forgotten Halo 1 maps that never saw a remake and didn't see a lot of play at tournaments and LAN parties. Definitely not local split screen. It's a very strange map. So for starters, I'm just going to do a loop around the map, and then I'm going to talk about how the different ways it plays. And then I'm also going to try and break down some ways to potentially improve the map, which maybe that's a little bit of heresy, but yeah, we'll see how it goes. So where I am right now, this is Arches, which is a really interesting space visually, just for the symmetry of kind of the central element with the asymmetric hallways branching off of it and the portal off to the side. But it's a very striking space just to move through and creates all of these really lovely sight lines that kind of open and close. If we continue along this way, we have the elbow, because it's a nice 90-degree bend here. And it's also sometimes called shield because you've got these deployed shields, which are kind of a map gimmick. You can shoot at them and it just blocks all bullets. In the campaign, these, there we go. Yeah, so you can destroy them eventually, but it's a little tricky to do. So if you're pushing up here, you can try and use the shields, but they're small enough cover, and it's easy enough to get a grenade around them that they aren't, and also like the height difference. So like if I'm back here at all, they can still probably see my head or shoulders. So it's not actually that great of cover. I believe you can shoot them down, though. Perhaps it's only grenades. Yeah, in the campaign, they start to change color as you take damage. So maybe it's only grenades. But here we have camo side and a portal to camo side. And we have these little nooks around the portal, which allow for more of that very cheesy teleport camping. So if somebody pops out here, you can try to whack them in the back. You've got some grenade spawns, very useful for those shields. And we've got a ramp from the camo side to the top. This space has, I always forget the different names that we call it, but it's basically just top mid, or that's how I'm going to be referring to it. We've got a cave, which I'll get back to in a minute. We've got this other ramp down to this room, which is pillars, because we've got a fuel rod or a flamethrower that shouldn't be here again, but we've got pillars that, against just very simple spaces that are split up to create these little sightline windows and very simple loops. And the collision is a little bit weird on this. These ramps on the edges are steep enough that you kind of start stepping up them, which gets rid of your control because you're in a falling state. But they aren't shallow enough that you can actually walk up the edges. So it's kind of a strange detail. This portal doesn't really have as much of a nook that you can hide behind, so you can't be quite as sneaky with teleports. But yeah. And that completes the loop back down to Arches, where there's the overshield spawn here. So I guess next thing to do is the teleports. So this teleport here at Pillars will take you over to camo side, right there. And it's a two-way teleport, unlike the ones on Chill Out. This one takes you back to Pillars. So basically we've got this big donut that at two far sides has a portal bridging across as kind of the shortcut. And we have one other teleport. I guess I'll show it the normal way first. So back here at top mid, we've got this dark corner. And this is one of those things that, playing this casually, just local co-op, I don't think we even knew about this dark corner for a long time because it's so dark. And, it's one of those things that if you come up this ramp here and you don't check your corners, and you're playing split screen, so low FOV, you don't check your corner, you don't even know this is an option, right? And same deal if you come up this ramp, which, it's not actually at a 90-degree angle here. It's at a really subtle, or maybe not so subtle, but, it's at a weird kind of skewed angle to the side here. So if you come up here, my eye's on that, assuming that I don't have some enemy around these corners I need to worry about. But then this becomes visible. But this is the tunnels, and the tunnels have this branch point. You've got a portal here on the side, and this is kind of a room. And you've got active camo over there, and if you keep going down this way, you've got a shotgun spawn, which isn't that powerful, and you've got an overshield. So this is kind of another one-way connector, because this is obviously a drop down. You can't like jump up here or something. So the idea, I think, with the level design is that you have to control the tunnel, which is this really risky space. It's narrow, it's easy to throw frags up there. You have to control the tunnel to control the power-ups, which means that when both teams know the power-ups are about to come online, everybody rushes for the tunnel entrance, and it's this big frantic fight in the tunnels to drop down with the power-ups, and then kind of go back to this loop around the map. Hence kind of the rat race title of the map. That doesn't really work in practice, though, because, I guess I should note with this teleport, this is kind of a weird connector up to the caves. This one doesn't see a lot of play. I'll get back to how it plays in a minute, but the reason why, I feel like the design was that you're supposed to chase after these power-ups through the tunnel, but what ends up happening is they've got physics, so you just shoot them down, and then there's no reason to go up in those tunnels. Those tunnels are death traps. You go into the tunnel and you've basically blocked off all of your options. You've become very predictable and very easy to frag. So it's not great to go up there, which is why this portal here isn't really that useful unless you're in the caves and need to exit through this position. And even arches isn't a position you really want to be in. So you just shoot down the power-up, you get your power-up, and then depending on which power-up you have, you either push the teleports to quickly loop to the other power-up position, because those two power-ups are basically just one teleport away, or you push through one of the non-teleport paths, either through the top mid or through elbow, and then you and your team have active camo and overshield. Yeah, so it's very easy to control the power-ups, mainly through controlling the teleports. What that opens up, though, is how do you stop people from using the teleports? And there are a couple tactics around that. One is that you can frag the teleport as you go through it to keep somebody from chasing you, which works all right. The human frag grenades work a little bit better with that, because then you can bounce it. The other thing you can do is that basically there's a trigger here at the edge of the teleport, but the spawn or the teleport exit on the other side is within that trigger. So if I step into this, I can step backwards without re-triggering. Oh, did they change this on PC? Maybe they changed it on PC. Yeah, here you go. And now I'm blocking the teleport. So if somebody in the other teleport tries to cross here, my screen will gradually fade to white, and if it fades all the way to white, then they'll telefrag me, and they'll get a kill, and they'll come out the other side of the teleport. But what I gained from that is I gain information. So I know there's an enemy trying to go through the teleport. I can now frag, jump out, let him come through the teleport, and they just got insta-gibbed by my grenade. So in competitives, a lot of the fighting ends up happening for control of these power-ups. The other thing that's I didn't mention with the Chill Out map is that Halo 1 has very, very unconventional spawn systems. In something like Call of Duty, the priority seems to be on spawning players away from other enemies, at least in like Team Deathmatch. And there are a couple kind of spawn zones it tries to prioritize, but usually there are like fallback points in the middle of the map that the spawn system can use. But the way that Halo 1 works is it doesn't seem to really care if there are enemies nearby or if there are enemies that have sightlines on you. What it does care about is if you're near allies. So when I mentioned in the Chill Out video about trapping the enemies in the shotgun corner, that's really, you get one of them in there and you kill the other one, and the one that died is almost guaranteed to respawn in the shotgun room. And at a really competitive level, beyond my knowledge and beyond my skill, there are a lot of ways to manipulate the spawn system to try and get your teammate to spawn in more advantageous positions. I can't really speak to that stuff because I don't understand it well enough. But in a map like Rat Race, what ends up happening is this arch area has a lot of spawn points, and it's really easy to trap a team down here in arches, spawning either on this side, which, hey, you got a health pack, so you can take some damage and restore your health. Restoring health doesn't restore shields, though, so you're still probably going to get one shot. But you kind of spawn trap them down here, and then what are their options? They can push the elbow, where they've got these shields that aren't actually that useful. And you've got these really long sight lines. You know, if there's another player watching that ramp to top mid, or back in that corner, or camping over at the camo there, I've got a pretty predictable path that I'm going to be crossing from. Whereas there are a lot of angles I have to worry about. And very easy just to throw a grenade. This is a bit short. Throw a grenade and force them back, or force them to commit. But like it's a really long hallway, basically. You've got this kind of nook off to the side, but this is basically useless. You aren't going to get any real... it's interesting because of the angle here, I'm actually able to duck into it, rather than like here I'm not. But one grenade right there, or even there, and I'm really vulnerable. And it's really easy for a teammate to rotate around arches. You probably wouldn't want to do that to avoid spawn trapping your teammates, but it'd be really easy to rotate around arches and pick off a player who's here. It's just not a strong position. You're really going to be at a disadvantage trying to push this. So then your other option is, hey, we're stuck at arches, let's teleport to the tunnels, where we have even fewer options. But like maybe we can force the timings on these power-ups. Maybe we can catch them off guard or inattentive and try and snag these. I think that's, again, how the map is meant to be played. If the arch area is where you get stuck, you can go to tunnels, and now tunnels, you've got a head start on this race for the power-ups. But again, if the other players are remotely good with their timings, they'll just have shot these down, pick them up, and even if they already have the overshield, the thing to do is deny the enemy team from getting the overshield. So you'll frag yourself with a full overshield to burn your overshield so you can pick up the new one, just so the enemy team can't get it, so that they have no chance of coming back. Yeah, like teleporting out there isn't really going to help you much. which leaves the last option, if you're stuck down to arches, is to push pillars, which is a little bit better in some ways. Like, this isn't a really long hallway just yet, and here the more disadvantaged cover is like on this side. Like, here's about as strong as it gets up close. If we really need that overshield, and I need to be able to shoot it and get to it without these other players getting to it, that's probably the best position I've got for it. But that's another one of these that you throw a frag back there. And my frags are really not on point. But you throw a frag back there, and that player has to either commit forward, and probably still going to get damage from the frag, or has to push back hard, and then they're exposed. So really the strong positions here are the fight from the pillars. But if you do this, you're so far away from the overshield timing that basically you need to have it on a clock, or really know the in-game times, so that basically I'm pushing for the overshield even before it spawns, so that I can be right here and shoot it and basically time it perfectly. If I'm sitting here waiting, does it spawn, I'm just going to die. So this is kind of the foothold in the map for a team trying to recover from the arches. Once you have pillars, then you have a couple of choices. You've got some control over the overshield. You can make this push into the active camo, which again has all these concerns about a player being able to camp the teleport. Also, like, it's pretty exposed teleport exit. You do have to worry about top mid. You don't really have to worry about shields, especially if you are just coming from arches. You have to worry about top mid, you have to worry about this corner, and you have to worry about these pockets. And the other option is to push top mid through this, which is a really long, scary hallway. And the way I think about these kind of spaces is that they are hard commits. If I see a hallway like this, this isn't the kind of thing that you don't just chase a frag through a hallway like this. If I see an enemy up there, it's like, ooh, I'm going to go after that guy. Bang, 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 I win. Taking a hallway like this means that I'm on a really predictable path. It's slightly elevated, so they've got kind of a head glitch advantage, which means that they can get into a position where only their head is visible, and they're able to see most of my body and still shoot me. Versus me, I'm totally exposed going up this ramp. And also, like, grenades have physics, so trying to throw a grenade up here, it'll basically stop on the ramp, versus throwing one down, get a little bit more bounce out of it. So if I commit to this, and I know there are people top mid, basically I need to have a coordinated push. I need to know, me and my teammate, we were trapped in arches. We got lucky with our overshield timing. We were able to push to pillars. We now have control of pillars. We can push the camo, or we can push top mid. Let's wait until we think camo's about to come up. You go camo, I'll push top. And then the hope is that we can split their attention, especially in like a 2v2 competitive scenario. You've got one player top mid, I can hopefully win my fight, and my teammate pushing through the portal can hopefully win their fight, or if one of us fails our fight, the other one can hopefully manage quickly enough to loop around and coordinate shots on the other one. This is still really hard to do because the timings are long enough. It's 3 shot with a pistol to get a headshot, or 3 perfect headshots to kill an enemy, which is pretty fast. Most of the time you don't get it in a perfect 3. Most of the time it's like body shot, body shot, body shot. Now their shields are broken. Maybe a headshot, maybe a headshot. So we're talking maybe a 2-second time to kill. It's also worth noting that the pistol, if you tap fire, think this is another one of those things that changed on the PC, but at least on console, if you tap fire, it's perfectly accurate. If you hold fire, which is much faster, then it starts spreading a lot. So if you have a fight like this and you're just holding left trigger, your shots can be all over the place and it's going to be terrible. If you pace your shots, that's how you actually get the kills, and that also means kind of a longer time to kill in total. But it's still short enough time that I'm really exposed taking this ramp. My teammate's really exposed coming out that teleport, and we can't really help each other unless one of us wins our fight and the other one's able to at least get the enemy to a wounded state where they're backing off. If I do win my fight, then the rotation here is to my advantage. Like if there's a 1v1 going on down here and they're fighting for the active camo, this is a really strong angle to be able to push. So I guess then if we're now in map control, we got control of top mid, we were at pillars from arches, and we've got active camo now. We've burned our overshield. The next thing to do is to get active camo back, because active camo will be coming up. And the other team is probably down to arches or maybe at pillars, even though we were just there. There aren't any spawns in the tunnels, I don't think, or if there are, they're very rare. So it's most likely they're going to be at arches. They might even spawn top mid, honestly, which can be really chaotic and disruptive. If I'm rotating around to help my teammate and the enemy spawns right there, then that's kind of the game just saying, well, you lose this one. But if we've had to collapse on this side for me to help my teammate, or vice versa, if my teammates come around here to help me win the fight on this side, then we'll probably rotate back around to pillars so that we can prepare for the overshield, which is a lot more powerful than the active camo. But the timings on all this are really difficult, and all these hallways are really long without a lot of branch points to them, which means there are a lot of points for potential failure. It's kind of it's an aptly named map. It feels like a final leg of a race where you're straining to cross the finish line before the other players. But kind of like Chill Out, it's one of these maps that the competitive isn't really compatible with the casual play, and also the casual play doesn't really work, and it's just kind of chaotic. All the rooms, I think, are a bit too similar looking. The tunnels are kind of a confusing room over room situation. And players just lose track of where they are, especially if it's a more chaotic match where you've got like a four-player split screen. 4 players, not that bad, but you do a LAN party and get up to like 8 players or something, and you're just gonna be dying so fast that you don't ever really have a chance to get your bearings and get a feel for the map. And it's back to the chaotic. Oh, there's an enemy. I'm gonna chase. Oh, there's a power up. I'm gonna get that. Oh, there's another enemy. Chase. So at the casual level, the map doesn't really offer a whole lot to stand out from, like Blood Gulch, Hang 'em High, Chill Out, Wizard, a couple of these others. But at a competitive level, it does become very interesting. You get 2 teams that are both really good at executing that strategy, of pushing the portals to control the power-ups and managing these really hard commits through these long hallways that are very exposed. And it becomes a kind of race. It's a question of which of these 2v2 teams is able to execute on the same tactic better, which team is able to break out of the pit, and which team is able to hold top mid and hold control over the power-up timings. And that can be really exciting if the teams are balanced, or if the teams are slightly imbalanced, then it can become very frustrating because you know what to do, the enemy knows what to do. You can see the enemy is doing what you're trying to do, but they're just doing it a little bit better than you are, and there's not really anything you can do about it. The map isn't very resilient in that way. There's not a lot of room for recovery, and it can just become a total spawn camp. It's not as bad as something like Derelict, but the reason why I wanted to talk about the map is because when it is competitively balanced, it's a very interesting experience, and it's unlike most competitive maps for Halo, or most competitive maps in general. It's I don't know. I think there's something special to it that's unfortunately overlooked. But I guess with this conflict between like, hey, it's not great for casual and for competitive, it can be really interesting. How do we bridge that gap? And that's, I guess, where I want to talk about the third section of this. Now that we've given a tour and I've explained how it plays, how could we make this map better? How could we make it more accessible for people who just want to hang out with friends and frag, people who want to just 4-player split screen chaos, random weapons, or everybody's got rocket launchers, or custom game where everybody's invisible, that kind of nonsense, or chaotic 4-team capture the flag, whatever. How do we make it more accessible for that kind of goof around, have fun Halo, while also not ruining the competitive side of it? That's, I think, something special that's worth saving. That's kind of a tricky thing. I think for starters, it would be to differentiate the rooms a little bit more and make it feel less claustrophobic. So the easiest option here would be to you basically got four corners to this map. You've got top mid, you've got the active camo, goes to L-bend, you've got arches, and you've got pillars. So pillars, arches, active camo, top mid. And they aren't exactly corners because of the way they're arranged with the elbow. But I think you could take a space like this and basically redesign it as an exterior space. Instead of having this be a ramp from an interior room to another interior room, make this your airlock. You're going out into the open. You've got a different kind of audio scene instead of this kind of droning mechanical alien sci-fi sound. You've got like a nice warm kind of Blood Gulch canyon feel. And then same deal here, you've got another airlock or something descending back into this alien fortress bunker thing. You could do the same thing with basically any of these corners. It would mean taking the hallways and reducing them to more of a threshold rather than being basically this consistent width hallway the whole length. But if you have this threshold, then you pop out, and now this is nice sunny Battle Creek, and then you cross and you've got another one of these thresholds into the bunker. You could even do that with the whole map if you wanted to. You could make everything outside, but then I think you've got kind of a similar problem in reverse, where the whole map could look very samey as these exterior spaces. So I think like a contrast there between two types of spaces would help. Maybe it's along one of the axes where it's like you take top mid, you take the active camo, and you say this is the open side of the map, and the other half is interiors. Or maybe it's top mid and pillars that are the open side of the map, and then it's the arches and active camo that are the interiors. But I think that would help with navigating. I think it would help with with also presenting kind of a fantasy and a theme for the space, because right now it's very abstract. One thing I didn't mention in the chill out video is that it's really hard to know what these spaces are supposed to be. It's truly abstract level design. In the case of chill out, there's a mix of Forerunner and Covenant texture sets. So it's unclear, is this a Covenant structure or a Forerunner structure with Covenant tech grafted onto it? And the reality is that I don't think the level designers or environment artists really gave it too much thought. They were more about creating interesting gameplay spaces. I think that's evident with stuff like this as well. This is kind of the Forerunner texture set, but what is this? It doesn't really matter. But I think that does have consequences for calling out, hey, I see enemy at location. The first time you're playing the map and you're trying to play it competitively, trying to play to win, you look around, it's like, oh, I've got enemy at, I don't know what to call this, we got pillars here. But then you learn, hey, there are pillars over there, and arches are kind of pillars. So you say, hey, I've got enemy at pillars, and your teammates over at pillars, and they're thinking, I don't have anybody here. So having more of these architectural differences, and really stark ones, like interior and exterior, is about as stark as you can get with architecture, to help players know where they are, where they're going, and also imply control. If there is a dominant strategy in the map, like this case, the dominant strategy is you control top mid, you control the power up timings, you make coordinated pushes with your teammates to coordinate the power up timings. That's the dominant strategy. And the question is which team can do it better. When you have a map that's resolved into a dominant strategy, I think that environment art should help, and level design as part of environment art, or level design as a facilitator for environment art, should help convey what that dominant strategy is, so that new players can adapt to it, or be a little more receptive to it. Like, hey, if the strong position looks like a total death trap, but it isn't, then you've really misguided players. If the weak position is like this fortified bunker that looks really strong, but it's actually really dangerous and all the frag grenades can go in there, then you've created a noob trap. Basically, you want to do the opposite of that, where this is the strong position, these are the strong positions. How do we decorate this in a way that makes it feel like, hey, that's the space you want to be? And maybe that's by making it this outdoor space where it's nice and sunny. It's like, of course you want to be out in the nice, sunny, easy to read, pleasant space. Or alternatively, it's, hey, this is the space that feels really secure, and you want to be there because it feels safe. Versus you go down here and you suddenly have the eerie bunker music of these alien spaces. It feels dangerous and hostile, and obviously you don't want to spend more time here. So I think that's one thing that could be done to help the map, especially on the casual side. I think the other thing is this one's a little tricky, because part of what I love about this map is the hard commits. If you push this hallway's terrifying. If anybody comes around this corner or steps forward, you are in such a terrible situation. You're gonna have to win this fight, or you don't really have any options. There isn't any cover to duck behind, at least not quickly enough. So it's really scary crossing a space like this. And same deal, maybe even more so with this one. It's just really exposed in a really long, it's basically a really long doorway, a really long threshold to cross through. And that's something I love about the map. But it's also, I think, the thing that makes it easiest to maintain control. If we've got this angle here, and the enemies are arches, wow, I've got a lot of options. if this guy pushes and he lands the shots and I don't, and my teammates over at pillars, I've got the time to step back, talk over comms and say, hey teammate, he's pushing elbow, can you come through the teleport? Teammate comes through the teleport, gets a couple shots off. Now I can duck out because my shields are back up, and this guy's maybe here by the time that happens. It's such a long commit. Or more likely we get a decent trade back and forth and we just push him back. So I think the way to make that easier for the pushing players, make it a little bit harder to get spawn trapped down there and make the map a little bit more resilient to this kind of back and forth push, is to give more footholds, basically give easier access up. These shields here don't really work. They aren't really useful. Throw a frag, doesn't matter where you were around that shield, that frag is going to get you. So you replace that with something like a pillar, like one of the pillars, where it's this nice chunky foundation. And now if a frag comes my way and I'm on, let's say, corner one of the pillar, and I'm looking out this way, grenade lands here, walk around, now I'm on the other side of the pillar. No damage from the grenade, I've got lots of options. And I can basically stall this fight. I can draw it out where my teammate can now hopefully win a fight for the actual pillars and push through here to help coordinate shots. So that'd be one option. I think that was like the intent with these shields, is for them to be a foothold, but they just don't work well enough for that. The other option would be, like I mentioned, if we treat this more as like a bunker door or something like that, you can narrow in the aperture of this. You'd probably want to do this in a way that is one-sided. So like, let's say the doorway is here to here. You've now created these cover pockets on this side and a big cover pocket on this side, right? And you'd probably want to do this in a way that avoids this sightline. So maybe the door would need to be, it's going to be tricky to do it just right, but you'd want to avoid a sightline where a defender can just control the doorway. But if you do it right, basically split the room in half and mean there's one fight to control for this space of the elbow, which should basically be a gimme. It should be free for the players. You spawn in arches, this terrible position where you usually get spawn camped. We want you to recover, so here's basically a freebie for you to push up, and now you've got control. And now the fight is from the doorway, which can be its own problem, into this space here. And again, you probably want that to be one-sided, so if there's a cover chunk basically created by the doorway, this is the doorway here basically, you've got these cover chunks on either side, you probably want to prop it up, or alternatively shift the doorway to one side or the other. Maybe it's better on this side, so that it's a corner-fed doorway. So basically if I'm walking through, I only need to check one side of the doorway to make sure it's clear. Going back though to the idea of like a pillar on this corner instead of the shields, the downside here is that it is a two-way kind of thing. That's always the trick with adding cover, is making sure, like, hey, we want to give a foothold to this team and not to the team that's up here. And if I put a big pillar here, then it'd basically be a similar situation to the pillars over there, where, pillar corner here. Now I can use this to hold off your push from arches, and maybe that's kind of a noob trap because I'm so far off from the active camo and from the teleport timings that maybe I can no longer coordinate. Maybe this is actually a bad position to hold, but it looks really tempting, right? As somebody trying to spawn trap the enemy team down here, it seems like this would offer a ton of control. So that's tricky. I'm not sure there's a great solution for it. Often with often this is where you see kind of weirder placed cover, stuff that's been rotated on like a 45 or even like a sharper angle than that, where these are on kind of 90-degree angles. Maybe they're slightly off, but yeah, that one's slightly off, isn't it? But basically it would be avoiding angles like what this shield provides here, which are advantageous, or at least in theory, if this was a bigger piece of cover, are advantageous to somebody trying to hold this corner, and making more that are like this, or maybe an angle like this, where if I'm pushing up here, basically the cover that a defender has is this thin sliver that's not actually useful cover at all. But as I come around the edge, it's now this full sheet of cover that I can use to have a strong advantage around. But that kind of asymmetric cover is really hard to make sense of contextually. Again, this is very abstract environment, or abstract level design doesn't really care about creating a sense of place or any kind of coherent sense of purpose. But it's also like a very kind of fiddly detail. A lot of the shapes of this map are these big blocky things, and creating a thin sliver of cover here, I think would feel so out of place with the rest of what's going on in the map. But like those are, I think, the kind of options that are in our toolkit to try and improve the situation here. Other thing is, of course, just break up sightlines entirely. If instead of this long shot, option 1 is you narrow the aperture. Option 2 is you break up the sightline a little bit by offering cover. Option 3 is you break up the sightline entirely. So, this is too hard to push. And I think this one's actually okay. It's more this one that I've got a problem with. What we could do is kind of a classic dog leg, which if you imagine the bullet holes here are the hallway. You see these all the time in like Counter-Strike. Like this is long A on Dust 2. So here's where I'm standing. There's top mid. The hallway does a dog leg to break the sight line. So step here. Here's a wall in front of me. And here is the doorway entrance. There's a wall here. So step in, wall, turn, wall, turn, and forward. This becomes tricky though. It really increases the timings it takes to cross here, and like I mentioned, the dominant strategy of having to control these two sides and this already very difficult push for the recovering team to be able to collapse on these two sides simultaneously. If you do this kind of dog leg, you're going to lengthen the timings even more. It's going to make it even harder. So I don't think this one is actually worth doing. And also, like the way I've drawn it out, it's like you've got this narrow, again, another one of these thin sheets of separation. And you've got these hard 90-degree angles. We've got all these corners to worry about. If I'm trying to get through this space as fast as possible, I'm going to do turns like this, and I'm not going to be checking my corners, which means there could be a guy just camping back here in a corner waiting for me to take this angle a little too narrow, and I've got an advantage, and I can sneak up behind and whack him. So what tends to feel better with these kind of dog legs is giving it enough space to actually breathe. So like in DE Cache for CSGO, I'm blanking on the name for it, but there's the T side door to mid, is basically a big warehouse with a shipping container splitting the warehouse in half, and the shipping container is offset against one of the walls and basically turns the whole room into a big C shape. But there's enough breathing room around it that you can take these wide sweeps, which means instead of doing these really sharp 90-degree turns, you can kind of float around the corner and do really slow camera movements to check the corners. And I think you'd want the same thing if you tried to dogleg this. You'd want to do the same thing as what Cache does with that space. And that would also keep it big and blocky, which is very much in the Halo architectural style. But then again, if you do that, that increases the timings and makes it harder to collapse. So perhaps the other case for doing that would be, again, here. You put a big block, basically dividing this. And now if I'm pushing up, well, let's go ahead and just mark that out. Let's say the block starts here. So you got this nice chunky block. And then we'd need basically a second block here to complete the S-curve. So now if I'm defending, I've got to worry about this angle. Now there's probably an angle here. And now I've got visibility back down onto arches. Or if I'm pushing up from elbow, I've got to worry about this aperture here. If I've got maybe a little bit of partial cover, then I can use that to help with kind of this wide angle. And again, that's a case of ways that the level design and environment art can kind of hint to the player, hey, here's how you're supposed to play it. If you've got partial cover, that says, hey, don't take this narrow. Take a wide angle at this. But take a wide angle. Now I've only got to worry about an angle here. And now I've got control of this space. Again, though, that's probably too tight for a good dog leg. We'd probably want more space for that. And again, that would increase the timings, which would make it harder to collapse, and again, harder to for a team that's trapped down arches to recover. I guess let's see, the options I've covered so far, pillar, cover objects, thresholds, and dog legs. So I guess the fourth option is basically the reverse of those and saying, what are your strong positions? How do we make them weaker? So if this is this weak position that we're in right here, and that's the strong position up there at pillars, enemies can poke from here and here, and I probably only see their head, maybe torso. How do we make it so that this is the strong position to be, and that's weaker? So I only have to worry about, let's say, here and here. I could just get rid of the pillar, but then it also becomes a lot less interesting of a space. These cool sight lines that open and close as you strafe around the pillars. That stops being a feature and it just becomes a kind of boring room. Having a 1v1 around these pillars is, it's fun. Having a 1v1 in an open room is less fun. There's less surprise. It's more who can land their shots, who has the better mechanical skill. But if we want this to be a stronger position where it's easier to recover, then there are ways we could do that. We could make this less of a kill zone here. Basically take this pillar and put it here. Let's say from here to there. So something like that. And now it's much easier for me, as somebody trapped down in arches, to push up to this pillar and use it as cover and help me control these angles where the enemy team could be pushing down. And now maybe the map is, maybe that's disruptive enough that the strong side of the map is now arches instead of over at top mid. It's really hard to say without testing some of these things. I guess the final note that I would have for this map, though, is I want to talk about the teleports a little bit. Teleports are really kind of a strange feature. On the one side, at like a competitive level, they allow for this kind of non-linear, like the connection between the two sides here is what makes this map work competitively. You can make these really risky pushes through the teleports from side to side. If not for those, the timings of this loop are just way too long for two players to coordinate, and the players with top control would just hold it the whole game. The teleports are what make it interesting and are kind of this threat for both attackers and defenders, or for both the players in control and the players out of control. The flip side, though, is that if I'm a new player and I'm trying to learn the map, and I hop through teleport, this is confusing, right? It's disorienting. Am I even in the same map? This looks like a different space. I don't know where to go. I don't know where I am relative to where I was. That fight that I was about to lose, do I still have to worry about that? Were there enemies nearby? It's disorienting. It's confusing, and that's a lot of negatives. But at the same time, it's also kind of if you're playing in a group of players who none of them know the teleports, or none of them know the map very well, it's also kind of a randomizer, right? It's your Mario Kart question block, kind of. Like, who knows what'll be on the other side? I'm going to just flip the coin, roll the dice, and see what happens. So it's very... I've got really mixed feelings about them, because it makes it harder to learn the map. It becomes this kind of... It becomes a tool where, like, a player who knows the map and knows the teleports just a little bit better than other players can totally stomp players who have no idea what they're doing. But if nobody knows what they're doing, then it's this great source of randomness and uncertainty and variety and surprise. And then again, at the competitive level, it becomes a really important tool for timings. So I'm of mixed feelings about it. I think for this map, it'd be too hard to get rid of. It'd be too hard to get rid of the teleporters that link the active camo to the pillars. I think, though, this one here, there may be a way of creating a staircase. It's really hard to know without being able to no-clip up there and see what it looks like. But the tunnels are already a kind of hard space to mentally parse or mentally grok. So I think, like, if there's a staircase, maybe here, maybe it makes more sense there. But some way to get up to those tunnels other than from top mid. And maybe that's risky. And maybe that creates another kind of access point of control for the dominating players. But I think it helps. It would help me and help new players better understand the space and better understand the connection between the tunnel as this playable space from the rest of the map. But yeah, that's Rat Race. It's a very strange map, much stranger than Chill Out even. It's kind of an older style of level design that we don't really see anymore, and definitely haven't seen in the Halo games since Halo 1. But it's a map with this really interesting competitive play. If you ever get a chance to play it at that level, I think the opportunity for that has probably passed. But hopefully this video is interesting and maybe also useful. So I think that's it.